Hey everyone, this is Kevin, your failed journalist, and we have to talk about some news today that hit the web not even that long ago involving Disney and Black Widow and West Side Story and pretty much all the movies releasing. And what can only be described as really, really bad news for movie theaters, really, really bad news for movies, a really disappointing move for fans, as well as something interesting about the future of entertainment. Now, as you all know, I've been fairly optimistic about movie theaters surviving. And to a certain extent, I still believe they can. You check out my last video if you want. I shared some outside the box thinking that movie theaters can do to generate some revenue. There's nothing stopping them, obviously, except fear of the unknown. And I think with new stories like today's news article that we're about to discuss, they might have no choice but to start thinking outside the box in order to make money. Nevertheless, this is really bad. In fact, this is probably the most disappointing piece of movie exhibition news I've heard since AMC decided to totally backstab the industry and, test out a 17-day window model. Of which this comes pretty close. I think Disney kind of backstabbed the movie theater industry because they have delayed everything. Everything, with one exception. They have delayed Black Widow by 5 months. They have delayed West Side Story by a whole year. Still coming up on my birthday next year, interestingly. Death to the River Nile. I mean, what was wrong with that? They've delayed it till December, which isn't too bad. But it had all of October to itself. Why couldn't it have survived? Well, apparently because it's based off an Agatha Christie novel, and maybe older moviegoers aren't feeling quite as comfortable going back to the movies. Therefore, that got delayed a couple months. Interesting factoid, and this is probably what I'm going to talk about really the most. Soul is keeping its November 20th release date for the time being. What's more, it's staying theatrical. Now, here's what Deadline writes. In the wake of COVID-19's continued grip on the box office, Disney made another round of release date changes Wednesday. The good news for exhibition being, nothing is headed to Disney Plus. And we'll talk about that in a moment. That includes Pixar Soul, which is currently sticking to its November 20th against MGM's James Bond movie No Time to Die. Now, I'm actually pretty concerned that James Bond will also be delayed, but now that I'm looking at it, if Soul and James Bond are coming out on the same day, can one of them move up 20 days? I mean, do they have to come out on the same weekend? I don't know. That's just a side note in the grand scheme of things, ultimately, though. We already knew Marvel's Black Widow was set to move. It's by far the biggest shift on Disney's theatrical calendar, going from November 6th to May 7th. That's a complete annual delay of Black Widow from its original pre-pandemic release date of May 1st this year. Black Widow shift kicks Marvel's Eternals from February 2nd, 2021 to November, a movie I'm not that interested in seeing, if I'm being perfectly honest, and obviously all of the other Marvel movies. Trickling up into Eternal's spot is 20th Century Studios' The King's Man, which jumped ahead from its February 26th to 2021. Now, here's what I'm kind of interested. Why doesn't The King's Man move in October? That's a movie they inherited. It's probably not very expensive. Why don't they just put that in October and see what happens? I don't know. So, Kamul Nanjiani, I hope I'm saying that correctly, of course, praised Marvel. And interestingly, here's like I don't know if this is an ad, this might just be like a picture, but the Croods moved up to Thanksgiving. So, where are we at now with this? And what does this say about, well, the business in general? Well, it shows that the business is clearly still scared of releasing movies in theaters and losing money on them. Tenet will cost Warner Brothers some money, unfortunately. I don't think it's going to be a bomb the way people think it is. I mean, it clearly has a lot of time to itself in theaters, and Warner Brothers will probably not send it to digital or physical media anytime soon. So it probably has a few months in there, but it's going to lose money. Make no mistake about that. And here's the thing. It just did not impress the other studios. Disney, as John Campea said in his little clip earlier today from his show, Disney's waving the white flag. They're just getting out of this year for the most part, except for Soul. Now, who knows what's going to happen with Soul? I think there's a couple things going on with Soul, and since animation's kind of my thing, I kind of want to put this into context. I was personally questioning whether or not that Soul would be going to Disney Plus. First of all, I did not believe that Mulan made $261 million in rentals on Disney Plus. I just didn't believe it. There were several studies of studying the traffic and everything. One study was very positive on Mulan, the others were kind of like, well, it's kind of inconclusive. And I also personally know people who signed up for Disney Plus. They paid their $7, fully expecting to watch Mulan, found out they had to pay for it, and then said, screw that. I'm not paying $40 to watch a movie, and then they just watched Hamilton or something else on Disney Plus. And even if it did make let's say it made $300 million on Disney Plus, that's still not enough to make that movie money. And as I have a friend who works at Apple and says, Disney movies on Apple, like iTunes or Apple Movies, I guess it's called now, typically make $200 to $400 million in rentals and purchases on average if it's a big title. And that's just Apple. So Disney, with Mulan, in my opinion, and I think it shows by the fact that nothing else is heading to Disney Plus, that basically Disney did nothing but remove revenue streams, I should say, for the movie. They're not making any money in theaters, at least in America. They removed the buying power from Amazon, from iTunes, all sources that they would have got money. I think they were hoping that Mulan would be big enough to drive people to subscribers and that they could make money and cut out the middleman. It just didn't work. And so the fact that Disney would rather delay everything, even West Side Story, up to a year, and not move Soul to Disney Plus, that I think that shows that the Mulan experiment was more or less a failure. I mean, Tenet was not a success either, but I don't think Mulan was a success as well. And so Disney's now reacting to that. Now, what's the main reason I think Soul is keeping its theatrical date? Well, I think even Disney, and it could still move, by the way. Who knows what's going to happen at this point. Soul might still not stick around. But I think Disney acknowledges the dire predicaments they have put the movie theaters in. Like, there's not going to be substantially big movies, at least from Disney, until May. That's going to be really tough because Disney, and this is unfortunately what happens when you have a studio who had 9 of the top 10 highest grossing films of last year alone. When you depend on one studio that much, if that studio leaves, you're putting your business partners in a bad position. So I think Disney is keeping Soul as kind of a show of good faith and maybe a little bit of an experiment. Like, well, let's wait a little bit while longer and let's put Soul out there and let's see how Soul does. And if Soul does better, maybe some things might open sooner. Who knows? I also think Soul won't go to Disney Plus because Pixar does not want their movies going straight to Disney Plus. They, like Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli, feel theaters are king. In fact, I would bet you that Pete Docter, who's pretty much just the guy in command, one of the 2 people along with Jennifer Lee, in charge of feature animation at Disney, he would probably rather push this movie back a whole year, forego what is probably a surefire Oscar win in the best animated feature category if people can see it in theaters. Also, Soul has the first black main character in a Disney film, or not a Disney film, a Pixar film, and it's probably not a good look to send it straight to streaming. That kind of, it's just not a good look. So now, as for my opinions, here's the thing. I can wait to see West Side Story. Technically, I've seen it. I've been watching that movie since it came out in 1960, so I've had plenty of time to watch it. I'm a little surprised that they moved Black Widow because I think Black Widow, unlike Tenet, really did have a strong pull, and they could have, brought people back in theaters. Heck, I think if you moved Black Widow up by a couple weeks, they would have had like a month and a half to themselves, and Black Widow probably would have made money. Would it have made pre-pandemic money? Probably not. But I think one of the things that's scary about this is, look, you still need to get the balls rolling. Tenet Clearly didn't get that to happen. But Black Widow might have been able to get the balls rolling, and okay, it makes $500 million, and breaks even, but you've resuscitated the movie theaters. And I'm just a little surprised that Black Widow moved. The other movies, not so much. But again, I think the big story here is that since nothing is moving to Disney Plus, I think that speaks volumes about how well Mulan actually did. Even if it made the 250 to 300 million that everyone's claiming it does, which I doubt personally, I think it shows that, look, it's just not enough. You can't just cut revenue sources out from movies. These movies are super successful because you make money in the theaters, then you rent it out digitally, then you sell it physically, and then after all that, you make a Netflix deal. And that's 4 revenues. Heck, the way that Mulan basically works now, you kind of down to 1, because Mulan's not moving off Disney Plus. It's just going to be there. So basically, they'll charge $30 until it's a freebie, and maybe they will still release it physically. I don't know, but it's kind of hard to see this being a good business model. So right now, October is looking pretty barren. If I were MGM personally, I'd move James Bond up a month or so, and let James Bond bring some people back in. But all the studios are skittish now. But the big question is going to remain is, will theaters be around? This showing archive stuff can only work so much. The theaters are going to have to get far more clever now to figure out how to stay relevant and stay in business. And this is one of those situations where I kind of wonder, like, is the cure not worse than the disease? Because all these studios, like, say, they want to make big money back on their movies, and I understand that. I mean, there's, they want to make money off those movies, so they're going to delay them. But by delaying them, you are putting the theaters in a precarious situation, and you're not training people to go back to the theaters. In fact, I think about a lot of these low-budget films that went straight to streaming, King of Staten Island, The Secret Garden, Wendy, a lot of these movies, and it's like, these probably would have been good movies to have something in the theaters, and they're inexpensive, so you're not going to lose much if you lose anything. Hindsight, of course, being 2020, I think this was all handled very improperly. And I know there's some people watching saying, well, I don't care, a screen's a screen, this is digital's the future. Whatever. Just send it straight to streaming. I don't care. It's kind of offensive to me when people say that, because it's like you're basically saying the communal experience does not matter. And also, I know why people are really saying they want to be streaming, because, hey, they want to watch it for free. They don't want to spend money on movies anymore. Just give me the movie, watch it for free. But here's the thing. You've seen what Mulan charges. They're not going to just give it away for free. And if they are going to start giving away for free, well, say goodbye to the MCU. Do you think the MCU is going to have $300 million budgets if you can't, monetize it? It's going to be $50 million budgets, and it might just become TV. Is that really what you want? I don't know. This was pretty disappointing to read overall. So anyway, I would like to know, what do all of you think about this? Do you think Disney made a good choice? They did not make a good choice. Where do you think this leaves the movie theaters? I'd love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.